So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate all of you taking time, which out of I know is a busy week always. I'm going to start with a question first. So I want you to think about whether this sounds familiar. So have you ever walked out of a client meeting feeling like everything went really well? You covered everything you needed to. The client was nodding along the whole time. The conversation was really productive. And then a few days later, you get a phone call or an email that made you realize, they seemed more confused than you thought. Maybe they misunderstood something that you felt like you explained clearly. Maybe they were just like anxious about something that was already addressed, or maybe they just couldn't remember a certain detail of something that you had discussed during the meeting. So that happens constantly, and I hear about it from advisors all the time. And the important thing to know is it's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. It's not a communication failure on your part. It's just the reality about how people absorb information, especially when it comes to finances, which can carry a lot of emotional weight. So how do we take that conversation we're already having, make them more clear, more memorable, and easier for clients to act on after they leave? And so the answer more often than not comes down to visuals. And I don't mean like complicated charts, these big slide decks. I really mean like simple, well-chosen visuals that support what you're already saying. So let's dive into it. So for those of you who don't know me or we haven't met, I'm Emily Reed. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hey Advisor. So before starting Hey Advisor, I spent many years working as a financial advisor. So I've sat across with clients. I know firsthand what it feels like when you can see someone's eyes kind of glaze over, not because they're not interested, but because there's simply a lot for them to process. It can be really overwhelming. So when I started Hey Advisor, that was one of the problems I wanted to solve. How do you give advisors access to great visual content without asking them to spend hours creating it themselves? So today we work with advisors and firms across Canada, including some of the largest financial organizations in the country. And what we see over and over again is the same thing that I noticed. That challenge isn't the advice, it's how the advice is understood and then remembered going forward. So that's what we're really going to focus on today. And I see if you are still joining as well, welcome. I send out the recording after as well. So if you want to go back and just see the first minute just to kind of set the stage, you can always do that after. So here's what we're going to cover today. And I want to flag this up front because I think it's really important just to kind of break it down. We're going to start with visuals and why they work. I want to go beyond it, just the surface level on this part. It's not just that visuals look nice. There's a lot of reasons behind how they improve comprehension and retention, and understanding those reasons will change how you think about client communication and incorporating visuals. Then we're going to look at where they fit into your meetings, specifically before the meeting, during, and then after, because each of those moments is an opportunity that I think most advisors aren't fully using. After that, I'm going to show you some real examples from the library, so content that you can actually use to start having these conversations and have these visuals to be paired with it, and map those conversations that you're probably already having. And then we'll wrap it up with like a simple, repeatable approach that doesn't require a huge time commitment. So the goal is to walk away today with at least one concrete thing that you can start just by trying immediately. So before we jump into the solution, I think we need to take a step back. And I think it's worth time spending a moment on the problem from the client's perspective, because I think we sometimes underestimate how much our clients are carrying into their conversations. So think about information overload. Start in a typical client meeting, you might cover a variety of things, especially if you do like a big planning meeting once a year and then just like smaller touch points through the year. So you might cover portfolio performance, an insurance review, tax considerations. You might update the retirement timeline. There can be a significant amount of information that's given during these meetings. So for someone that doesn't live and breathe it like you do, it can be really overwhelming. Then there's the uncertainty part. So most clients don't know what they don't know. So they're not sure which questions to ask or whether they're even asking the right questions. And that uncertainty itself can keep them quiet during the meeting, even when they're confused. Many of the topics, financial topics, carry emotional weight. Like we all know this, retirement planning isn't just a financial exercise. It's really tied to someone's sense of security and their vision for their future. Insurance conversations touch on morality, and even market volatility can bring up fear. So clients aren't always able to hear information clearly when they're feeling really anxious about it. And then a lot of clients won't say they don't understand something. So they might be afraid to actually ask the questions. They don't want to seem like they should know this already. And so they kind of nod along and just think like, I'll figure this out later. And then later, that's when the confusion comes out in a phone call or email, like I was talking about, or sometimes in a decision that doesn't reflect what you discussed. So here's what changes when you add education to the relationship. When you consistently share clear, helpful information with clients, you stop being seen as just the person who manages their money and you start being the person who helps them understand their money. And that's fundamentally different relationship, and it's a much stickier one. Clients who feel educated by their advisors don't shop around as much, so they're not influenced to change and to move their money or to look for a different advisor. They're less reactive when markets move, and they make better decisions because they have context. And they actually do refer people because they are able to say to their friends and family, my advisor actually explains things in a way that I can understand them. I remember speaking to an advisor at West who started sending one educational infographic to clients every month. So just one, and it was on a topic like relevant to the time of year. Within 6 months, he said he actually received 3 referrals to new clients, and they specifically said it was because they heard that he was good at explaining things. So it wasn't that he had like the best products or the best solutions for things. It was that he was explaining things clearly, and that was really important. So that's what repeated education does over time. It's going to build a reputation that goes beyond what the typical advisor is doing. So I love this quote from Michael Kitces. When clients understand their finances, they are empowered to make better decisions, and that builds trust. So it's not about impressing clients on how much you know. It's not about overwhelming them with all this data and proving you're an expert. It's about helping them understand enough to feel confident by the decisions they're making alongside you. When clients feel empowered, their whole dynamic shifts. I know you've seen this before. So they come into a meeting and they feel prepared. They ask better questions. And then they trust the recommendations you're making because they understand more of the reasoning behind them. And that empowerment doesn't come from like one big conversation or one big meeting. It comes from consistency, and it comes from clear communication over time. It's like a little bit of education regularly is going to build up that confidence. So why visuals specifically? Let's look at the numbers. People remember 80% of what they see versus 20% of what they read. So that's a huge gap. It means that if you explain something verbally and a client walks out of your office, they're likely to forget most of it within 48 hours. So that's a lot. But if you pair that explanation with a visual, they hold on to it longer. Visual content itself also generates twice the engagement on average. So whether that's in a client conversation or social media, when there's something to look at, attention can hold longer and people can engage more actively. And then 65% of people are visual learners. So that means that the majority of your clients are wired to process and retain information better through images, diagrams, and charts than just words alone. So I spoke with an advisor who's been in the industry for 20 years and felt like overall their meetings were really successful. They're one of those advisors that's always trying to like push the limits, see what they can try, test the waters, see what kind of sticks when it comes to their client education or client management, sorry. And so they started using one infographic. They picked an infographic from the Hey Advisor library and decided like for the next 5 client meetings I go to, I'm just going to bring one and see. And it was just an experiment, and it was really, really successful. So she actually emailed me and said, like every client looked at the infographic first before I even started talking. Some of them even asked for her to send it after the meeting. Like, can I take that home with me? Can you send it to me? And she found the conversations were better. They're faster. They got to the point faster, and they were more focused. So that one kind of just like changed the whole dynamic of the conversation for the positive. Now let's talk about meetings without visuals versus with visuals. So without visuals, most of the work is going to fall on the explanation. So you're going to say something, you're going to watch to see how are they comprehending it. And if it doesn't land, you rephrase it and you say it again. So you end up repeating yourself a lot because you're trying to find new ways to say the same thing in a way to get the communication to the client. And a lot of that can feel like it's on you. You do a lot of the talking in the meeting, and it can feel like a lot for the clients. With visuals, you actually move into like a different mode entirely. So instead of telling, you're actually showing. Instead of restating things or repeating things, you're simplifying things. And instead of following up with clarity, you're reinforcing something that the client already saw and understood. So an advisor I know who primarily works with retirees described it to me this way. He said, before he started using visuals, he felt like he was doing all the heavy lifting in the meeting, but after he felt like it was more of a conversation. So the visual was doing some of the work, which meant he had time to focus on listening, actively listening to the client and responding rather than just kind of explaining things and presenting. And so that shift from explaining to showing, it sounds subtle, but it really does change that whole overall feel and what you and the clients are getting out of those meetings. Now let's get into a practical framework because I think this is where I want you to start thinking about your own business and what you're currently doing. There's 3 moments in every client interaction where a visual can really make a difference. And they're all this is all set around meeting them, whether it's like you're meeting them on Zoom or Teams or whether you're meeting them in person. So it's before the meeting, during the meeting, and then after the meeting. So most advisors, if they're using visuals, which a lot are, they're using them during the meeting because I think that's the most obvious place. That's when you're really sitting down and, again, trying to explain something. So having a visual really helps there. But before and after is where a lot of the real value can get left on the table. So before a meeting, a visual prepares the client. So it's going to give them context before you even start talking. So you actually can begin the meeting at like a higher level than the base. During a meeting, a visual is going to simplify the conversation. So it gives you something both to anchor to, it takes some of the cognitive load off the client. And then after the meeting, the visual reinforces what you talked about. So it reminds them of what you discussed. It helps kind of the key points stick past that 48-hour window where most of it would fade. So when you start using all 3 together, the client experience around your meetings becomes stronger and your meetings actually become more efficient because they're building on prior understanding rather than starting from scratch each time. So these are things that advisors have said they've heard from their clients. So can you imagine if you walked in and your client says that visual helped to click? That one to me means the verbal explanation alone like wasn't quite getting there and that visual helped close the gap. And so that's amazing. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. The next one is that answered a few of my initial questions. So this is a client who received something before the meeting. They had time to look at it and they came in with some of their questions already answered. So that advisor got to skip those basics and go straight into the deeper conversation, which is really where you shine. That's a better use of everyone's time. That's your professional advice being used when it can. And then the last one is I came in with a few questions. I came in with a few questions already in mind. This one's one of my favorites because it shows that the client is showing up engaged and prepared. So they're not just going to passively attend the meeting. They don't want to be told what to do. They looked at the thing you sent them, they thought about it, and they came ready to participate in the conversation. So think about what that does to the quality of the meeting overall. And then during the meeting, a well-chosen visual, it acts as like an anchor to the whole conversation. So it helps keep things focused. Instead of meeting that drifts from topic to topic, you can actually keep bringing it back to the visual to get back on track. It reduces the confusion in real time because when a client can see what you're explaining and not just hear it, again, they're more likely to follow along and stay engaged in the process. And then it takes some of the pressure off you because you're not the only one responsible for carrying the entire explanation with words. The visual is doing some of that work. So I had an advisor tell me that they have a client who seemed to always like understand TFSAs versus RSPs in meetings, but every year they would call like with the same question afterward. Like there was always kind of this like follow-up question that hadn't got answered every single time. So she started pulling up like a simple side-by-side comparison of the two and use that alongside explaining like what the difference is and which ones they should look at contributing to that year. And the client stopped calling with those questions. So to me, it's not because the advisor explained it differently. It's because she had that visual piece to hold on to. And like the client actually had that to reference later to remind them of the conversation. So I thought that was a pretty neat way that even just things that we take for granted that we know, it takes a long time for the clients to get that into their system. And having that as a reference later reminds them of that conversation. So I want to pause on this number. I think it represents a big opportunity in the industry. So only 27% of advisors consistently follow up with educational content after meetings. So most advisors I know, they put a lot of effort into their meetings. So they do the prep, they focus on the relationship. There's this like quality of advice that they're doing during the meeting, and those are all there, and that's great. But when the meeting ends, sometimes the communication stops. And here's what's happening on the client side. They leave with a lot of information and a lot of really good intentions. So they're going to think about what they discussed. They're going to make sure they understood everything correctly. But life gets busy, and within a few days, those small details can start to fade and their confidence starts to drop. And they're like, I can't remember why that was the right decision. I know we've thought about implementing this, but like, did I ask about this? And sometimes the uncertainty can lead to decisions that don't reflect what you discussed, or it can lead to inaction. So they just don't simply follow through. If you follow up with a single piece of educational content, that can change the dynamic because you're also opening it up for additional questions. You're summarizing the meeting in a way. And I know a lot of advisors do meeting notes, but I think an educational piece that they can take away with them really shows that you are listening and that you care about them educating themselves about their financial future. And I think the biggest part is that only 27% of advisors are doing that consistently. That's a huge advantage available to those of you that can do that. So let's use some real examples. And so I'm going to I've pulled some content from the Hey Advisor library, some of our more popular pieces. I think it's really useful when you can walk away from the session with this is something I would actually use and not a hypothetical situation. So I've covered 3 topics. Again, I just kind of picked them. The Hey Advisor library, we have over 300 pieces of content. So we really cover a holistic wealth management approach. So there's something in there for every conversation. And so we have today, I'm just going to share RSP contribution deadlines because that's one that comes up every year, market volatility, and then insurance protection. These are conversations I know advisors are having with their clients across Canada. And each way, I'm going to show you kind of a visual that can support your conversations. So let's start with RSP conversations. And hopefully you have a big monitor. And so you can actually kind of look at it there like that. When you view it in Hey Advisor, it's more of a scrollable infographic so that clients can see it better. So RSP conversations, we know this happen every year. What's interesting is when I talk to advisors about it, they often find that the same questions come up each year. And it doesn't really matter where someone is in their career stage. So a client in their early 30s may want to just understand the basics, like what it is, why it matters, and how much they should be contributing. Someone more established, in their 40s, is going to want to know whether they're on track with it, and then how to make the most room out of their contributions. And then a client later in life is wondering how this fits into their retirement goals and how they're going to start to convert that when they do retire. So an infographic that walks through all these key facts can give them something clear to hold on to. It's purposely organized in a way that's easy to absorb, and it gives them something to take home or to refer back to after the meeting. So I know an advisor that uses this one every year in February, and she sends it to all of her clients that are going to do the RSP review. And her reasoning is that it's sets a financial mindset before the meeting even starts. So she told me clients who come in having thought about their RSPs, she finds that they're better prepared for the whole conversation, and it gets that part of the brain activated and ready. The next one is market volatility. I know this is one of the most emotionally charged conversations that advisors have with their clients. It's also because of that, the time the visuals really make the most sense. So when a client's anxious about their portfolio, you can obviously explain verbally how markets work, but that can often feel abstract to their situation. So when someone's worried, it's really hard to hear things like this is normal, it'll all be okay, and actually feel reassured. But when a client can see something like this, so they can see the cycle of investors' emotions laid in front of them, it shifts their mindset. So they look at it and they recognize themselves in it. They see that the feelings they're experiencing, like that urge to do something, to move money, to protect themselves, is a named, documented phenomenon. Like it's not just them. It happens to all investors, like most investors, I'd say, at some point in their life. So that recognition is really powerful because it takes that fear of it, like of something personal, and shifts it into something more like universal, happens to everyone. So I've had advisors tell me that they keep this infographic, or we have a few other ones on market volatility as well, that they have it like ready to bring up during volatile markets. And one advisor, he told me that he had a client that called and they really panicked, and he brought up the visual, and they'd seen it before, because part of his process is to talk about market volatility when things are great. Like, just a reminder, like this is part of investing. And so he brought up the piece again, and it was like, it reassured them, it calmed them, and they didn't make any rash decisions because it was familiar, and that visual part like opened up, unlocked their brain to a sense of security. So he said he could have done everything, like he emailed me and said, like, I could have done everything I said. And I don't think without the visual, it really would have worked, because seeing it is where like that cycle made it feel real for them. So that's the biggest difference, I think, with like the explaining versus seeing. And then insurance conversations are another area where I think visuals change the dynamic overall. The challenge with insurance is that it's future focused. So you're asking a client to invest in something that they hope to never use. And because of the benefits hypothetical, the conversation can feel disjointed from their actual reality. So this one, for example, like walking through how much life insurance do you need, the things you're going to think about, like income replacement, outstanding debts, future expenses for your dependents. The client starts to see their actual situation in the visual, which makes the discussion more concrete. So an advisor I know that primarily works with young families told me he decided to start bringing up like this simple infographic every time, and asking, and they would use this as like a pinpoint kind of like to talk to. And he said clients were more engaged, they had opinions, they raised concerns he hadn't, and more importantly, like they actually followed through on the recommendations afterwards. So he said before he always felt like he was a presenter and was like presenting options, and then after it felt more conversational, which was great. So I want to take a moment to kind of say, like, when you think about visuals, like you don't need super complex charts or like elaborate graphics to make it work. In fact, like in my experience, the more complicated the visual, the less effective it's going to be. The best visuals are the ones that make one idea very clear. So one concept explained simply with design that guides the eye naturally. I've seen advisors use like beautifully designed, really data-rich pieces that take a lot to like set the stage for. And then I've seen really simple like 2-column comparisons that completely change how the clients understand things. So more simple, you want to be clear, educational, and if you have to explain the visual, then the visual's not really doing an effective job explaining. So I think about this one a lot. I mean, I think this is applicable to communication in life in general, but definitely as a financial advisor, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. We can have a great conversation, we can explain something clearly, we feel confident that the client understood, and then we leave the meeting feeling great. And the client can actually do the same. They can feel like, this was a great meeting, I feel so great about everything. But then you find out 2 days later, like, something didn't really set, something didn't land. And that's really the gap we're trying to close. So where can you start? If you're thinking about like, okay, where do I go from here? I think it's great, I'm going to start incorporating more visuals. I want to give you like a simple exercise that I think can really help you get started without taking a lot of time, and it's drawing on your personal experience. So at the end of this week, like before you close your laptop on Friday, look at your calendar and ask yourself these 3 questions. What did I explain most this week? If you explain the same thing to 2 or 3 different clients, that's a signal. That's a topic that has a natural use for a visual. Where did clients seem confused this week or maybe uncertain? Not always that it's a topic you're explaining poorly. Like sometimes it's just a topic that is genuinely complex. Those are the places where a visual can help you. And then what conversations coming up in next week might be easier with a visual to support it. So you don't need to answer all three. Just start with one and kind of go from there. I know an advisor who I suggested this to a while ago. He started doing it every Friday, like for 10 minutes, and he kept a running list like on a Google Doc or on like an online document. And what he did is he started to like build up like, okay, these are the key questions. And then from the Hey Advisor library, he was like, these are the pieces that address those questions. And so now he has this like go-to document that he knows, like if someone's asking about this, like this is a perfect visual for it. So you can really start to like build up your own kind of connection paths to visuals that for your client conversations. And then once you started building up like visuals and into your individual conversations, the next is like, how do you make this repeatable? How do you make it consistent without constant effort? So I love the idea of like a quarterly theme approach. I know advisors that do this and they find this the most simple way to tackle it. So you start at the beginning of each quarter, you pick one topic that's relevant to your clients right now. Maybe it's tax planning, maybe it's retirement income, insurance conversations, and then you use that across everything. So client meetings, follow-up emails, social media, newsletters if you're doing one. It becomes like self-reinforcing and clients start to hear like a consistent message from you, and that will stick. And then again, taking that visual piece, like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you find a visual that works really well in client meetings, post it on social media, put it on your website, use it in events, send it as a follow-up. You don't have to be reinventing the wheel. Like one piece of content can touch all areas of your business and have the same impact in a different way in a different audience. So I'm going to spend the last like 2 minutes talking about Hey Advisor, but a lot of advisors I know get stuck on like what to share and when. So this is a free guide we have. If you just actually scan the QR code, you can download it and it will give you like month by month and content ideas. So it's really, I've gotten a lot of feedback that it's really helpful. So you can go ahead and do that. And then I'm realizing like, wow, okay, it's getting close to 1 o'clock. So I'm going to try to kind of skip through like this Hey Advisor part pretty quickly. You can always come on our website and book a demo. You can send me an email and I'll give you all my contact information in a minute. But the challenge I hear from advisors is that they want to use more visuals, but they don't have time to create it. And even that compliance part is a hard barrier. So that's what we solve at Hey Advisor. We give you access to over 300 videos and infographics on topics your clients care about. You sign up and within minutes, you have a full content library with your logos on the content, ready to share on your website and emails and social media. And we're in our 5th year of business and we work with independent advisors all across the country. Again, we make it really easy. So in minutes, you should be able to choose a theme, open the library, pick a piece and send it through our platform, whether you're sharing it to social, sending it directly to a client. We actually have within the platform, it can open up Outlook for you and fill in the email template, making it as easy as possible for you and your team members to get content out there. We add your logo on everything. So we add your logo to the bottom infographic and around the other pieces. But if you want to take it one step further, we have a Canva integration. So we give you a direct link into Canva for the quick insights where you can add your personal touch. So some advisors are changing the colors, others adding their photos, some adjust the detail to better reflect just their like specific client base. And you don't need any design experience to do this, which is amazing. And our content is developed through our amazing advisor community across Canada. So advisors tell us what they need and we build them. That's great because that means that's what clients and the real conversation that they're having with their clients. We also have subject matter expertise. So we have a lawyer, we have a senior advisor who helps us with all the content. And that's how we make sure it stays relevant, accurate, and appropriate for advisors to share it with their clients. And it's not generated quickly and just put out there. It's developed with the right input and reviewed by people that understand what advisors actually need. We have new content every single month. So based on what's coming up, we add 5 new pieces every single month to the library, and we're constantly looking for feedback from advisors of what content to create. And so we'll continue to grow the library. And sorry, I know it's 1 o'clock. This is my last slide, and then I'll show my contact information. But I just want to say, like, there is no commitment to Hey Advisor in order for you to get started. You can actually try the platform for free for 14 days and see how it works in your business before you make any decisions. And for advisors who need the compliance sign off, we work with some of the organizations already. So if you're curious if one of them is included, just send me a link or send me an email, and I'll let you know. If not, we'll love an introduction so we can start that process. And we try to make that process as easy as possible. There's no work required from you. We manage it on our end. So that's everything. I really hope you found it genuinely useful today, and thanks for spending 30 minutes with me. If there's one thing I'd love for you to walk away with, it's this. You don't need to change everything about how you communicate with clients to see a real difference. Just try adding one visual to one conversation and pay attention and see what happens. If there's any questions as well, you can put them in the questions right now, or again, send me an email after. I'm happy to answer for you. The QR code goes to my calendar, so you can always book a time to talk with me, but let me just check to see if there's any questions. Oh, there is one. Okay, so it says, what if I have a very niche client base? So will the content still feel relevant to them? It's a great question. And honestly, I think this is where like the content plan becomes really valuable for you, because you know exactly who you're talking to. You can easily be intentional about the content you're picking and what you're not going to use at all. So the Hey Advisor library covers like a range variety of topics. So in that case, especially since you would be really niche, I don't think you'd be sharing everything. But for example, like if you're working with business owners, you'd lean into like all of our content on incorporation or tax planning or succession. So yeah, there's something for every niche and every advisor. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you all again for spending your midday with me. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.